Hey everybody, I was going to talk a little bit about my plot creation process. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new one here, and it'll give you some ideas as to what I like to do when I'm creating a plot. Um, so just to start here, this is just I literally just did the new plot. I turned the hills down to 0. You can see there is kind of like this native, the random terrain that it puts in there. It looks pretty cool. But one thing to keep in mind is that when you do this, a couple things. One, notice that there's no global elevation change, right? From one side of the plot to the other, it's basically the same elevation. And this is going to happen even if you turn the hills up to like, I've got it to 90. Yeah, there's big local elevation changes, but overall it's still a flat plot, right? So you're really limiting yourself if you just rely on the random terrain, and then you deal with the auto flatten issues when you're laying out surfaces. So um, in general, I don't use the auto gen terrain. I have used it before. That's not to say I'll never use it again, but I would never rely on it more or less exclusively. So for the purposes of this plot, we'll go ahead and set that to 0. And moreover, we're going to, even when you set it to 0, you're still going to have a little bit of elevation change. But we're going to flatten that all out. Okay, and then I'm going to raise it about 20 feet. I don't do that. You might not do that every time, but we'll talk about what we're trying to do here. Okay, so this gives us some room to maneuver in terms of raising and lowering without hitting the natural water table. So now that we have a flat plot, what do we want to do with it? So this is where you want to. I like to have some kind of vision in mind. What sort of natural features do I want my plot to have? Um, and this is where Google Earth or online topo maps can be helpful. It doesn't have to be a golf course, um, but you want to have an idea of what you're looking for, right? So um, for this one, I'm trying to make sort of a plot for like a northeastern set Donald Ross course. Um, so what I do first is, well, I'll look at Google Earth because I'll have some courses in mind that I might want to riff on. Um, so I have what do we have here? We have Wannamoisit Country Club in Rhode Island, and we also have Essex County Club in Massachusetts. Unfortunately, this Google Earth aerial is in winter, but that doesn't really matter for the purposes of what we're doing here. Um, but just kind of, study the terrain here, right? What's going on? So Essex, its main characteristic is this big rocky hill that it's got, sort of in the middle of the back nine. Um, so we'll probably want to create a feature something like that in our plot. And then, look at the creek here. We see how it kind of meanders along the property boundary, then it kind of cuts across. It looks like they dam it up right here, and then it goes off the plot. And we can get a sense of, okay, it looks like it's kind of in a gentle valley there. Here, there's kind of like a big hill to one side of it there. We're just kind of getting a feel for what exactly is this piece of land like, right? We're not necessarily going to copy it verbatim, um, but what I like to do is I get a sense of, okay, how big is that hill, right? So we can use the elevation data in Google Earth. So if this hole that's kind of at the base of the hill is about 25 feet above sea level, the top of the hill looks like it's about 110. So we're talking about a hill that's maybe 90 to 100 feet high, and then we can also do some measuring and figure out kind of how, about how much space does this hill need to take up. So it looks like it's maybe like, depending on where you start and finish, it's about 300 something yards from one end to the other. Okay. Um, so yeah, that's something we'll take into consideration. Um, I wanted to show Wanamoisa here too, because one feature that it has lots of interesting sort of small scale topography, but um, we can see that it kind of has this river or this creek that's flowing through the property, right? It goes all the way out to here, um, and you can see it's not just the same creek all the way through, right? Like right here in front of the ninth green, it's dammed up to create a pond, and then there are other holes where it's sort of piped underneath the fairways. Um, I'm not saying I'm going to do that when I create the plot to begin with, but it's something that if I were going to build a course on it or, send it to someone else, something I might encourage them to do. Okay, and then we can get a sense also of, how wide is this valley here. So, like right at the base of the valley, it's about 40 feet above sea level, and then up here in the fairway, it's about 56, so about 16, 20 feet higher or so, and then up kind of on the other side of this green, it looks like it's another maybe 10 feet higher. So again, we're just kind of getting an idea of what scale contours are we looking for here. Okay, so having done that, the other thing that you might want to look at is um, sort of global elevation change, right? What's the global elevation change from low point to high point on a given course? So, for example, like right here, this is 42 feet above sea level. If we go to one of the higher points on the course, which is kind of the opposite side, 72 feet, 91 feet. So it looks like we're looking at about 50 feet of global elevation change in this one. If we go back to Essex, I believe the low point is probably right around here. So yeah, we're looking at about 10 feet above sea level. And then the hill itself is is 100 something. So that's about 100 feet of elevation change. If you only look at maybe parts that aren't on the hill, right, that's about 30 feet. So maybe, about 30 feet higher than the low point. Over on the other side, it's, again, about 30 feet higher than the low point. Okay, so that maybe gives us an idea of what we're going to do in terms of how big are our raises or lowers going to be, etc. Okay, so in general, I'll with these ideas in mind, I usually build 2 or more plots and kind of see which one speaks to me more. I'd say more often than not, I end up going with the first one I build, but not always. So if we return to the designer here, we've flattened out our plot. So what we want to do now is get a sense of our plot size, right? So how much room do we want our golf holes taking up? Tentatively, obviously, right? We can always, it's our course, we can do whatever we want. So I had, I kind of checked out what the dimensions of those courses were. I came out with roughly 800 by 1,000 as the sort of plot size I wanted to work with. Um, so we'll create a tentative perimeter here. Okay, and then we want to kind of sketch out the hills. Um, we want to have a creek in this case, so we'll sketch that out. So just kind of sketch out some of your main features. Um, if your plot's going to have a considerable amount of tilt in one direction or the other, you probably want to bake that in early, and so on. So let's say we're going to put our large hill kind of right here. So, right, so that gives us room to kind of route around it, and if we want to try over it or into it. And then let's say our creek is going to be, again, this is very tentative, as you'll see. Kind of meandering there. And, you know, thinking about the creek early, again, when you study the creek on Google Earth, it gives you a sense of what kind of route do these things take. How can we make it look natural? Because I, you know, on some courses I'll see people with creeks or like barrancas or similar natural features, and if you zoom out and look at where it goes on the plot, it looks completely unnatural, right? It's as if you built the holes where you wanted to, and then you just built the natural features around the holes, and it looks pretty unnatural, right? That's not to say you can't change anything after you know, put it in, but it does take hard work to make it look like it's been there from the beginning. Okay, so we'll go ahead and create our hill here. So I'll just, again, I think we'll deal with the sort of global elevation changes a little later, because I think we'll probably want to put the creek in first. So let's just try like 80 feet here. Okay, so we'll just kind of spin the brush around here, see what we get. Okay, I think we can work with that, and we'll do some massaging of this too. Right, we aren't done. And then I want to have a few hills over, kind of surrounding the plot as well. So put some slightly smaller ones in over here. And we'll put some in here on the other side. Okay, and then I'll check. So yeah, that's way too high, right? 180 feet. That's much more than I wanted. So I'm going to make some adjustments. This is about 80 feet tall. Yeah, I think I like that. I don't think we really need to mess around with that too much. Yeah, that seems reasonable. Yeah, this one, it's just how the brushes ended up overlapping. So we'll go ahead and make this a little more gentle. I think we probably want something a little closer to 100 feet. Yeah, we'll knock that one down a little bit too. Okay. So what else do we want to do? We want to kind of create that little valley that our creek is going to sit in. So we'll say that's going to be maybe like, if we go back to Google Earth, get an idea of about how far across those went. So I'm looking on Wannamoyset now, and it looks like it's kind of anywhere from 100 yards down to maybe 50 yards in terms of width. So, in other words, right, we don't want really steep creek banks. Generally, you want to avoid those. But we'll kind of create a little corridor for our creek valley here. So, we could try the lower here. So yeah, we'll give this a try. Okay, and I think what I'm tentatively thinking here is we'll have the actual creek going out this way, and this won't necessarily be a creek, but it'll just be a valley. So you could potentially build things on it. So believe it or not, basically we've kind of got the plot sort of baked in now, and now it's just kind of fine-tuning stuff. Yeah, so now we see that our valley here has a depth of about 20 feet. That seems about what we wanted. So now we can go ahead and I'll go ahead and try putting the creek in. So I'll go ahead and create, if I can remember how to put water in. And I'll put it so it's just kind of poking across. Okay, actually let's make it even lower than that. Okay, so no water is showing yet, so we're going to go ahead and lower the land so until we hit the water. And so we'll go ahead and dig essentially a valley. And generally what I like to do is kind of keep the camera low, get a sense for where the dips are based on how you've sculpted it, and kind of follow those, roughly speaking. Right, so I'm not going to follow the line I put down with the measuring tool exactly. Okay. So now we're going to do a whole bunch of like little sculpts here. I'll just keep lowering this until I actually get the water showing through. But clearly we don't want this steep, these steep walls to our creek, right? So we're going to do some broader land adjusting, right? So we'll lower this a little bit more so that we can get a nice broad creek valley without anything that looks unnatural or abrupt. Okay, so and then there's just going to be a lot of adjusting going on to get this looking like a normal creek. So I'll go ahead and do that offline, so just to keep the video reasonable, and then we'll come back on the other side. Okay, so we have got a rough routing for our creek. It's sculpted, the surrounds are sculpted in a way that makes it at least look somewhat natural. We've got our hills roughly put in there. But we still got plenty of featureless land on our plot, so let's go ahead and fix that. So at this point, we'll go ahead and maybe take care of some of that global elevation change we wanted. So we'll maybe raise this part of the plot up about 30 feet. Just so now we've got we've got a gentle rise going out this direction, and then we'll do the same over here. So we'll just make a nice big brush so that the land in between the creek and then the valley is raised up. Okay, and now we just need to add some features here, right? So um, what do we want to do? So some of this will be can be kind of random. It can be kind of deliberate. Like I want to maybe make this valley here that I had sketched out. Doesn't really look like much of a valley at this point, so maybe I'll try sculpting that. We don't want any water there, so I'll raise this back up. But certainly kind of in this area here we want some lower land. Okay. So most of our broad features are kind of here now. Right, the overall land features are kind of starting to take shape. So at this point, I just want to rough up the land a little bit. So we'll go ahead and make some semi-random smaller scale contours. So I'll use a couple of these kind of odd-looking brushes. You probably don't want anything that's going to be too sharp. You'll certainly smooth stuff out anyway. So if it makes it look a little too rough, that's okay. But the key with these is you don't want the contours to be too big. All right, we've just created a few random undulations there. You'll notice I'm avoiding the creek bed. Okay, so that's roughed up a little bit. Maybe we want a few more prominent features though, so we can maybe do a few smaller scale things. That makes it a little rougher. I'm not sure I like that. Okay, and we might take this. These ones you're probably going to be looking more like 2 or 3 feet in terms of the elevation. Okay, so we're at this point we could probably start routing a golf course, but if we want to, we can. If I want this hill here to be fairly rocky, so right, we might use some of the sharper brushes to make maybe the face of this hill a little more gnarly looking. Okay, that looks a little better. And then, just kind of inspect it. Look if there's any areas that look like kind of unnatural. If there's like little depressions like going into the side of the hill. You'll also notice I lowered the inclination of the sun a little bit just so we can see the contours better. Alright, we could do the same with those other hills too. Those ones don't matter. We probably don't need to spend as much time on them because they're probably going to get covered with trees anyway. Um, and then what I like to do after having, I might do a couple more passes with brushes like that if I still don't see it, if it doesn't feel like rough enough for my liking. But then you could also look around. The last part is something that I strongly recommend is kind of just start scanning around and look for little features that you think you might be able to sort of accentuate, um, or sort of craft into an obvious green site. So maybe, okay, here's this little rise beyond this valley. So maybe I want to create a sort of a sharp little feature up there, right? Just make this a little more sharp edged and a little more prominent, so you might, maybe there's a decent green site there that's sort of perched over the valley here. Um, right? So just look around. Maybe do like find like half a dozen or a dozen um, little spots on the plot where you kind of see something and you're like, all right, there might be something there. Do I want to try and accentuate it? And then like certainly like this part, I think I need to smooth out. Right? That's a little too bumpy. So we'll do some of that too. Um, but yeah, that's basically it. So this is by no means a finished plot, but I think I've kind of talked through the things I like to look at when I make a plot. Let's see if we can find maybe one more site to accentuate that's not too similar to what we just did. Okay, so like there's maybe this. Maybe we want to make this slope coming off of this side of the hill a little more gentle so that we might be able to sort of build a green there. Again, if you try it, just undo it. It doesn't matter. And, if unless you're doing this for like a dream team style scenario where someone's giving you restrictions, don't be afraid to completely change things if you have a routing that you really like, but it's got some awkward spots. It's your plot. You can change it. I've definitely done this before with with a number of my courses. But just remember, you always want to make it feel believable. Um, so yeah, there we go. We got a plot that's ready to build on. You might sometimes I'll like to do some sort of preliminary environmental planting before I start routing the course. Like I might put some big rock features on that hill there. I usually don't though. I usually just wait until I've got a routing and I'm building holes. Then I'll start doing some of that. But you could certainly do it at the beginning if you kind of want to set the mood. So hopefully you found this helpful in any way in terms of creating your next plot in the designer.